Hey everyone, Tony here. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a sort of unofficial VR for Orlando, a collector's dream. The other day, Orlando showed a couple of really fantastic and sought-after Super Nintendo games. So some retro, vintage video games. And I have a kind of small collection of Super Nintendo games myself. So he kind of just inspired me to do this. My small collection of Super Nintendo games focuses on obscure or kind of scarce, mainly fighting games, and mainly fighting games that did not see a Western or American release. So basically, most of these are Japan-only titles that never, made it to the States or other Western countries. So I'll just start it off with one that I picked up the most recently. And I actually haven't played this yet, but it was kind of on my radar because it fits all of my criteria of being kind of a little bit more rare and obscure and did not get a Western release. So this is called Battle Tycoon. It's a fighting game. And this is from 1995. So nice sort of mid-90s anime artwork on the front there. Here's the back. This one, some of them I will take out the manual because sometimes the manual, this one's in pretty good shape. Sometimes the manuals have like really nice artwork in them. So this one has a kind of talking about the story and let's see here. So there's like profiles of all the characters in the manual. This one, so like I said, pretty obscure. I don't think this even got a sequel or it was never a franchise or anything like that. So that is Battle Tycoon. I found this one. I was so super thrilled to find this one in a kind of like used media shop. So this shop had all kinds of stuff, books, video games, and I was like, man, that's one that I wanted. So I was pretty thrilled. So Battle Tycoon. Let's see here. This is one of my favorites. This is Gundam Wing Endless Duel. Gundam Wing, of course, of the famous Gundam franchise. Gundam Wing was one of the first Gundam series to make it to the United States on the, Cartoon Network's Toonami block. I remember watching it as a kid. So this one is pretty nostalgic for me. The manual. So this one did not get an American release either. This is a Japan-only title. So, this one too. The manual in this one is a little bit beat up, unfortunately, but that's okay. These are, as usual, it kind of has the... So here you're actually fighting in the giant robots. You're a pilot inside of one of these robots, and you're fighting. By the way, Japan has a thing about pentagons. I don't know why, but this is still a thing where they show like different this visual representation via pentagon is something that Japan is like into for some reason. So anyway, yeah, pretty nostalgic. Gundam Wing Endless Duel. Let's see here. Actually, so this is kind of this one is definitely not a Japan-only release, and is probably a title you're pretty familiar with, at least just on a casual level. Otani in the back doing Japanese games, very fitting. So, yeah, Mortal Kombat. So this is Mortal Kombat 2. I should mention, although if you're watching this, you might know, in Japan, the Super Nintendo is called the Super Famicom, which is short for Family Computer. Japan's big on abbreviations and mashing words together and shortening words, particularly words and phrases of foreign origin. So anyway, Mortal Kombat 2, this is significant. So this is pretty rare. This has the significance of being the only Mortal Kombat game to have ever seen release in Japan, believe it or not. So Mortal Kombat 2 got a Super Nintendo or Super Famicom release, and no other Mortal Kombat title has ever come out in Japan. And that's partly, somewhat weirdly, because of the level of violence in them, which is something that I still don't quite understand precisely what's going on with Japanese censorship laws. So Japan, it seems, has a particular sensitivity to not, it's kind of graphic, innards or viscera or like disemboweling, or I think they're like very sensitive about that, weirdly. So Mortal Kombat, with like the fatalities and how like, spectacularly brutal and violent the Mortal Kombat games are, they just haven't ever seen another Japanese release. And actually, this one is also censored. So the Japanese release of Mortal Kombat 2 was actually censored. Here's a little, just sort of a peek inside the manual. So the blood in the game is actually green. They changed the blood to green. And the fatalities, that is the murderous finishing moves that Mortal Kombat is famous for, are still in the game, but they actually make the screen black and white. So they take the color off the screen when a fatality is happening. Now, to be honest with you, I'm a little bit confused about this whole censorship of kind of ultra-violence here in Japan. Definitely, Japanese media doesn't have a shortage of very violent content in its own right, at least in terms of blood or... And ironically, I know when some of the Japanese anime made it over to, like, the United States, for instance, like Dragon Ball, they actually censored the Japanese content for American audiences because of it has, although it's geared toward kids, it has blood and things like that, and they thought that was like a little too violent for American kids. So it's a little bit ironic in that respect. And I also know, by the way, this is an insert in the game itself, so this is, it shows you how to do the fatalities. They have like a little insert here that shows you how to do the finishing moves. So anyway, yeah, I know, like, particularly around this time in the 80s and 90s, Japan produced basically a lot of, like, direct-to-video anime. And a lot of these titles are really, really violent. Like, really Mortal Kombat levels of violent. And yet they were not censored. They're not. So I just, again, I'm a little confused about the state of Japanese censorship laws sometimes. I just don't get it. But yeah, so Mortal Kombat, this is the only one that was ever released in Japan, primarily because of the violence. So maybe enough about Mortal Kombat. Let's move on. This is another fighting game that only saw Japanese release. This is a Godzilla title, as you can probably tell, even if you can't read it. This is Godzilla something like the great decisive kaiju battle. So, yeah, Godzilla title. This is pretty cool. It's got various, Godzilla kaijus, Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Mothra, kind of like the roster is pretty much all the, like, sort of staple Godzilla monsters. So that's a pretty cool one. This is Samurai Spirits. And I think that this one actually did get a Western release, but I think it's under a different name. So it's not called Samurai Spirits. But this one is almost like a, kind of like a precursor to like a Soul Calibur, because all of the fighters use weapons. So it's a standard fighting game, but they use swords and other weapons, kind of like Soul Calibur. I'll show you the inside of this one too, just because this one actually came with a card, which I like. So like here's the manuals, and it has something called a Psycho Power card. So I don't know if they had one of these for like each of the characters or not. But I got this one, and then some pretty nice art on the back of the manual there of all the fighters. So, Samurai Spirits, yeah, again, I do think this one saw a Western release, but I don't recall. I think it is a different name. Alright, put that off to the side there. Next one, so this one is very obscure and a little weird. Did not get an American or Western release. This is called Cho Aniki. And Cho Aniki is most of the games in this series are actually shooters, like scrolling shooters. But this one is actually a fighting game. And Cho Aniki it literally means Super Big Brother. And it's like these two bodybuilder muscle men that are brothers, and they have like laser beams on their heads. It's sort of just like really peak kind of like weird Japan stuff. But this game is actually kind of interesting because your standard fighting game, right? You've got the characters on the ground and they can jump up, move back and forth and jump if it's 2D, or around and jump if it's 3D. But this game actually takes place like mid-air. So it's like mid-air combat. Your character is floating. And so the game mechanics are a little different, which makes it kind of interesting, but also kind of a challenge. You have to direct your attacks certain ways, or there isn't like, kind of just a jump mechanic with your sort of standard fighting game controls. The game also looks really good too. It's one of the better looking Super Nintendo games I've seen, along with probably this one. Endless Duel is maybe the best looking Super Nintendo game I've seen, just in terms of like its fluidity and the visual quality of it. So yeah, Cho Aniki is a really, really obscure and weird, and did not, see an American release. This one's pretty hard to come by, I think. And then finally, I've got, this one's actually not a fighting game. It's the only one I should say that this is my collection of boxed Japanese Famicom games. I also have some that don't have the box anymore. But this is Sonic Wings. And this is a vertically scrolling plane shooter. This is sometimes in Japanese known as danmaku, which is like a sea of bullets, or literally like a bullet curtain. So you've got a little plane that's shooting, and there's, and there's just like, you know, missiles and everything just like flying at you. It's one of my favorite genres, actually. So this is called Sonic Wings, and the Japanese version is a bit scarce and sought after, but actually this is an instance where the American issue, the Western issue of this one, is like one of those like holy grail games. It's kind of like, so Orlando showed the Western version of Earthbound, which is in the same category with collectors, like just like one of those grails, because it was pretty rare. They didn't, you know, make a lot of them for the West. And this is another example where the Japanese version is pretty scarce, but it's the American release, which I believe goes under the title Aero Fighters. That is like one of those grail games that's super rare and valuable. But I remember Sonic Wings or Aero Fighters. I remember playing it as a kid in the arcade version. And actually, so my father was in the bar business, and sometimes I would go down to his bar, and for some reason they had Aero Fighters. They had, you know, a pinball machine and some other stuff, but I remember at one point they had the arcade cabinet of Aero Fighters, and I remember thinking it was really fun. So then eventually I got, this is the Japanese release, but it's called Sonic Wings here. So yeah, this one has a cool manual too. It gives like a sort of a breakdown of the different pilots that you can control. Of course, you can't see them in game, but it's just a plane. This dude looks like kind of a Guile ripoff, like Guile from Street Fighter. And yeah, so there's two, I think it's like 4 countries: the U.S., Britain, U.S., UK, Sweden, and Japan, maybe. And then depending on like the player 1 or player 2, the character is actually different. So here's like one of the Japanese pilots. He's basically just like a ninja, and then the other Japanese pilot is this, you know, cute girl with a braid. And there's like one of the Swedish pilots is like this big Viking guy. So anyway, it's kind of fun. So that's that. Video's getting kind of long, so I will just end it there. But yeah, my collection of Super Nintendo games with boxes. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Peace.